Okay, let's talk about this wonderful process of merging.
Hmm.
Okay, so there's the main net, which is the Ethereum 1.0 chain, or what should we say? The chain that uses proof of work as a consensus mechanism. And then there's what is it called? The beacon chain that uses the proof of stake mechanism. And I believe the beacon has been deployed successfully, is working.
Mhm.
So that was in December 2020.
Mhm.
There's a bunch of questions around that that's fascinating as well. But I think the most fascinating question is about merging those two. When do the two chains, one that's proof of work, one that's proof of stake, merge?
Mhm.
And what are the most difficult parts of this process?
Mhm. Right. So, as you've said, right, the way that we have set up this proof of stake transition is that at first, the proof of stake chain just launches on its own, right? And this is the thing that happened in December. And the proof of stake chain has been running for close to 6 months now. I mean, by the time people watch this, it might actually be 6 months. But it isn't actually coming to consensus on anything except for itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind that is to just give the proof of stake chain time to mature, time for people to build the ecosystem around it, time to make sure that there aren't any bugs, and just like prove to the community that proof of stake actually is real and and a full transition is realistic because the thing that you're transitioning to already exists and already works.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point in the future, you have this event called the merge, where you basically take the activity that's being done inside of the proof of work chain and you actually move it over into the proof of stake chain, so you get rid of the proof of work side completely. So the way that the merge will work is, it's definitely gone through a few different iterations. Like the earlier versions of this actually required more work for users and more work for clients. It was much more like, oh, there's this new chain, there's this old chain, and then everyone has to like migrate from the old chain to the new chain, and then at some point, we'll forget about the old chain. The new version is designed to be much more seamless for users, right? So basically, what actually happens is that the old chain basically becomes embedded inside the new chain, right? So starting from the merge transition block, every proof of stake chain block is going to contain a block of the what we consider to be the Ethereum chain today, but we'll call it the execution chain. And then at the same time, to create one of these blocks, you're not going to need proof of work anymore, right? So basically, at the same time, you would both get rid of the proof of work requirements for one of these blocks to be valid, but instead you require these blocks to be embedded inside of the proof of stake blocks, right? So you basically have like a chain inside a chain. And this is, from an architecture perspective, it's, you might think it's a little bit suboptimal, but it actually has some nice properties. It makes it easier to kind of think about the consensus and think about what we call the execution layer, like transactions and contracts kind of separately and upgrade them separately. And it also just means that the upgrade process is extremely seamless, right? Because from the point of view of a client that's following the chain, you basically have to update nothing, right? You're still following the same chain and follows the same rules, except instead of checking proof of work, you'll switch to checking that these blocks are embedded inside of blocks of the proof of stake chain.
Got it. So there'll be this merge block that will mark this transition.
Yeah.
And over time, I guess the new chain will contain the full record of all the transactions that's ever happened on the previous chain, on the old chain. So like, maybe I'm asking a dumb question here, but in this process, is the new chain going to have all the information of the past transactions?
The new chain is not going to hold information from what happened in the Ethereum chain before the merge, right? So like Ethereum clients of that people are going to use like around the time of the merge and soon after the merge,
Yeah.
they're probably just going to sync and check the proof of work chain up to the merge, and then they're going to check the proof of stake chain.
Yeah.
But at some point in the future, I think people will just stop bothering checking the proof of work before the merge.
Got it. So that old history information is not important for the future, or like if you're operating actively on the new chain, that history is not important to you.
It's not important. let's see. So it's not strictly important for for just like in any like smart contract or just like applications that run on the blockchain. It can be important to users and it can be important for some applications, but we're basically saying that like maintaining and serving that is not going to be simultaneously the responsibility of every Ethereum node. If you want that information, there can be separate protocols for backing it up. And like these other protocols actually exist, right? Like there's something called the Graph, which is doing some history retrieval. Potentially, you can just take that entire chain and stake it on BitTorrent. Like there's lots of ways to like archive it and create kind of customized search protocols for it.
So what's your sense why? So there's a Python 2 and Python 3, and it took forever for people to switch. What's your sense why this merge has been taking longer than perhaps was expected?
I think the biggest reason is just we've been underestimating the technical complexity. There's a lot of technical complexity in making a successful proof of stake chain. There's a lot of technical complexity in actually figuring out the transition process.
So that's bigger than social complexity. So it's the technical complexity, you would say, is the bigger reason for any delays than the social complexity.
I actually think so. I think we've been very fortunate to not have too much social complexity around the merge.
So not much drama.
No. I think the biggest part of the reason is just because we have been talking about proof of stake and sharding as being part of the roadmap since almost the very beginning of the project, right?
Yes.
Like the very first proof of stake blog post is from January 2014, which was 2 months after the project started and like maybe even a day after the announcement. So it was proof of stake was not something that we kind of put on anybody by surprise. And then when the DAO fork happened and the people on the ETC side split off, I think it also just happens that a lot of the people that were not willing to stomach the DAO fork and then join the ETC side, they were the more Bitcoin-y types, and the more Bitcoin-y types do also tends to like proof of work more. And so like that also sort of ended up, sort of like purifying the communities on both sides, I guess. So Ethereum Classic is not switching to proof of stake, and they're happy with their setup. And by the time that it came to the Beacon chain launching, and now I think the community is very strongly in favor of the proof of stake switch.
But let me ask the question that no engineer wants to hear, which is the question of timeline. When do you think the merge will happen? Do you have a sense it might happen this year? Do you have a sense it might be pushed towards next year, 2022, or even beyond?
I think early 2022 is the most realistic. There's definitely still like an optimistic case of it happening this year, but like the realistic thing to count on is definitely the early part of very early part of next year.
Is there specific things that stand out to you that are like they'll make you feel good about progress if you see it happening?
So the thing that we had last month is we had this online hackathon called Rayonism, where basically a bunch of the different client developers that are going to be part of the transition hacked together some test nets of the post-merge Ethereum chain. So these were only test nets of what would happen after the merge. They were not test nets of the transition itself. So the thing that people are working on now actually is the transition. So having a full specification of both the transition and post-transition. I mean, we have specifications now, but realistically, they'll probably needs to have a couple of changes and have things that continue to be ironed out, and then have a test net that does both the transition and the post-transition. And then once you have a test network, then you just have to do a lot of testing and audit it, and then do some runs on not just a specialized test network, but on, say, an existing test network like Ropsten or Rinkeby that Ethereum people already significantly use. And if it works, then you can deploy the transition on mainnet.